Welcome back. President Muhammadu Buhari has been speaking on the purported sack of some aides in the office of the Vice President, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, which generated controversy recently. The president said the action is entirely a reorganization in the presidency with no undertones. President Buhari spoke after his arrival in Nigeria from the United Kingdom yesterday, emphasizing his administration's stand on accountability.
We are going to work harder to be accountable and try to make Nigerians understand why we do certain things, if they appreciate it or not. Like they said, 35 people were sacked in Vice President office. We just created a ministry and we reorganized, and people are giving it ethnic and political dimension. It's unfortunate.
Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari. To health issues now. The United Nations year 2030 target for universal health coverage may be 10 years away, but for some medical practitioners, the time is ticking, and it's ticking fast too. And the current state of healthcare financing, which centers heavily on out-of-pocket payment, casts a gloomy picture on its attainment in the country. According to these practitioners, the current low health insurance coverage in the country and lack of judicious use of available resources in the health sector are impeding the achievement of universal health coverage.
It is only about 10 years away to the United Nations target for the attainment of universal health coverage by the year 2030. Although much has been said about the need to achieve universal health coverage in Nigeria, medical practitioners say the current low level of health insurance coverage, as well as corruption in the sector, cast a gloomy picture on its attainment by the year 2030.
The NHIS was able to cover only about 5% of the population, in fact less than 5%. So, yes, so it hasn't made much progress in expanding the volume. And insurance depends on volume. You must capture as many people as possible so that the funds accruing from this number can go a long way to fulfilling the expectations. Because if every one of us is covered, the payment from each one of us may not be heavy, but because little drops of water obviously would make an ocean.
I tell you, funding is a problem, but for us, if you treat these two, corruption and funding, the little one we have here will even be used for a greater population.
According to the Ministry of Health, over 70% of payments for healthcare services in Nigeria are out of pocket. The National Health Insurance Scheme (NHIS) was introduced by the federal government in 2005 to address this challenge and provide health insurance for citizens. Over a decade after, health insurance coverage is still very low, just as the scheme has been embroiled in series of corruption allegations in recent past. So what is the way forward?
Politics comes into a lot of problems in Nigeria, and quite often that particular decision-making process leads to corruption. So, but I think let's not get derailed by the fact that cases of corruption have been identified and so on, and therefore we should forget the main problem of trying to solve financing the healthcare. There are a lot of guidelines on how it has been achieved in other places. Maybe we haven't gotten it right from that direction, administrative side.
Universal health coverage is a term that promotes access to quality and affordable healthcare services without exposing patients to financial hardship. Experts say a virile health insurance system is needed for this to happen in Nigeria.
Now let's take this issue further, and we're now being joined live from our Abuja studios by the President of the Association of Resident Doctors in the FCT, Dr. Roland Aibuvu. It's a pleasure having you with us.
Thank you very much.
The United Nations targets 2030 for the attainment of the universal health coverage. Do you see Nigeria achieving this target?
Well, thank you. With the target of the 2020, with what is on ground, I don't see us getting anywhere close to achieving that target in the year 2030. The reason being that the parameter that is obvious to us and that is on ground now does not actually put us in any way of achieving that target in the year 2030. First and foremost, we're talking about universal health coverage, or providing health care to the people with less out-of-pocket expenses. And that actually was gave what the vehicle was supposed to use to achieve that is the health insurance scheme, which on its own is only about 5% of Nigerians that is enrolled in the national health insurance scheme, which the larger population is federal workers. Now, what about the other state workers, the 36 states, and even including, just of recent, Delta State is actually doing something to achieve that in the state health insurance scheme, as well as the FCT and Lagos. What about the other states? What are they doing? To achieve this, we really need to put up so many factors. One is to expand the scope. Expanding the scope is now getting more people to enroll in the national health, or rather in the health insurance scheme, whether it be national health insurance scheme or the state program. There's also a voluntary contribution for provide insurance for those in the non-formal sector. And if that is done, on one part, pooling of resources, and the other part is actually provision of services, especially one to have to do with the workforce. And another key vehicle to achieve universal health coverage is the primary health care. You quite understand that, or quite know that primary health care system in Nigeria is almost non-existent. And there is no way we'll achieve the 2020 target if our primary health care, the first level of care, is at this abysmal level. Is quite disheartening and it's quite sad. And this really has actually put the secondary and tertiary healthcare facilities under a whole lot of stress. So with all this, achieving that 2030 goal of universal health coverage is not realistic in Nigeria.
So, Dr. Igbovo, how can Nigeria increase her health insurance coverage for citizens from the estimated less than 5% by the National Health Insurance Scheme?
Okay. Like I mentioned earlier, one, not even as I speak to you, I don't think it's all federal health, all federal public servant that is enrolled in that health insurance scheme. I think it should make it a form of maybe a compulsion for workers to actually key into that insurance scheme. Because even the 5%, I know for sure that the federal public servants in Nigeria are well more than 5% of the population. And if that is done, and as well as the state government also keying into this idea of health insurance, at least with that, we should be able to have a good coverage in the health insurance. Because now, if you talk about the 36 states, of the 36 states and FCT, like I mentioned earlier, only Delta State, FCT, and I think Lagos are actually doing well in the state insurance program. Even of these three states, I don't believe it's also 100%. I think they are just trying to make an impact. If other states key into it, and as well as propagating the voluntary contribution for those in the non-formal sector, it will do us a whole lot of good to improve the health insurance coverage.
Dr. Roland Igbovo, it was a pleasure sharing your thoughts with us on the News at 10.
Thank you very much.
To security matters now, the Nigerian Navy says it's intensifying efforts towards the protection of the Nigerian maritime space as it announced the arrest of 2 suspects with petroleum products worth over 47 million naira. The commander, NNS Victory, Commodore Vincent Okeke, who personally supervised the arrest of the suspects, explained that 300 drums of suspected illegally refined products were also intercepted. Handing over the suspects and the product at the Victory Jetty in Calabar, the Cross River State capital, to the Nigerian Security and Civil Defense Corps, Commodore Okeke asked the perpetrators of these illegalities to desist from their act. Now let's find out what's happening in the world of business. Anne has details.
Melinda, good evening and welcome to Business News. Nigeria and the United Kingdom have renewed commitments to improving the level of trades between both nations by establishing a trade center to help boost their ties. Diplomats and executives of both countries shared this plan at the investiture of the 16th president of the Nigerian British Chamber of Commerce right here in Lagos. Our correspondent, Temple Ashaju, reports.
British Chamber of Commerce is one of the foremost bilateral trade bodies in the country, aiding the £5 million worth of trade ties between both nations. This gathering of members features the investiture of the 16th president of the chamber, Mr. Kayode Falowo. Present here are also guests from all walks of life, as the event becomes a platform for Nigeria and the United Kingdom to reiterate their commitment to boosting their bilateral ties.
We recently commenced conversation on partnering with the Chamber and its members to create and establish a trade center that will help midwife trade between Nigeria and the UK. Our focus on an economy beyond oil agrees with the major set pieces of a British economy beyond Brexit. If Britain looks beyond Europe, it would find a credible, resource-rich and talent-endowed partner in Nigeria.
I'm delighted that the UK will be hosting in January the Africa Investment Summit, the first of its kind, I hope the first of many, and my role along with my team is to ensure that Nigeria plays a starring role at that summit. And all of you here this evening, I hope, will help us to achieve that goal of increased investment, increased bilateral trade between our two countries.
To consolidate these plans, the guest speaker, Mr. Martin Thorell, illustrates his confidence on the Nigerian markets.
It's not that Nigeria needs the UK, it's the UK needs Nigeria. With that shift, trade with countries such as your own is going to become even more important.
And next is the inauguration of the president.
We have a 12-point agenda. One, which is actually at the heart of most members of the chamber, is the completion through commissioning of the MBCC Plaza and dedication of a facility within the plaza to host a trade desk and a business incubation center.
With quality vision from the new president of the chamber, his tenure may just be making history for the trade ties between Nigeria and the United Kingdom. Temple Oshaju, Channels Television News.
Private sector players and fund managers are hopeful that the quick passage of the 2020 budget and the return to January-December cycle will help stimulate the economy in the new year. Sharing some economic outlook for the new year, the chief executive of wealth management firm Capital Bancor, Mr. Igboje Higo, says that he sees the decision of the National Assembly aiding rapid moves by investors.
There's a budget that they are threatening to pass before the end of this month, which means hopefully 1st of January it will be signed, or it will have been signed. It will have been the first time that has been done in donkey years. So the issue of we're waiting for the budget, we're waiting for the budget to plan our own budget, that will come to an end. And the idea is that, okay, not only do you get the budget signed, but do you start implementing on time? Because the argument was we couldn't start implementing on time because it was not passed and signed in time. But if all of that is not, and you start implementing on time, and Fashola gets the money he needs for the roads, and by the first quarter of the year, some serious money is already pumped into the economy. There was some of these other things, and you are taking some serious decisions on some of the serious issues that we are faced with, and the Economic Advisory Committee is giving good advice, and the advice is being listened to. The 2020 and beyond looks very good.
For the second consecutive week, the Nigerian stock market closed positive, with the key benchmark index gaining 2.04% week-on-week to 26,851.7 points, while market capitalization added 261.5 billion naira to resume its 13 trillion naira mark. With over 2 billion shares traded in the 4-day session, investors exchanged 33.8 billion naira in 21,849 deals. Banking stocks took the largest chunk of the pie, rising the most by 6.7%, while the oil and gas sector recorded the worst performance for this week. Wema Bank outperformed all other stocks by a 28.81% gain, while Total Nigeria fell by 9.98%. The details of federal government bonds on the Nigerian Stock Exchange's database has been updated to represent the schedule of outstanding federal government bonds from the Debt Management Office as at October the 25th this year. Latest edition includes the 12.75% interest rate, April 2023 paper with over 349 million total outstanding units from 213 million units. The 14.55% April 2029 maturity adds 153 million units to 312 million units, while the April 2049 paper now has a total outstanding unit of 330 million, and that's after adding over 129 million units. And that's business news for this week. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Anne Mwawadu. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and the News at 10 continues with Melinda.
I'm sure they will. Many thanks, Anne. Still ahead on the News at 10. Stefanos Tsitsipas gets the biggest win of his career after defeating six-time champion Roger Federer to reach the championship match of the ATP Finals in London. That's on Sports News. Stay with us.